your commissioner sucks. There's no two ways about it. A good commissioner equals a good league. A bad commissioner equals a bad league. So what makes a good commissioner? So a good commissioner is going to be a good communicator. That means that they're going to communicate when the draft is, what is needed, what kind of league it is, if there's any special rules in place. They will communicate to people who are not setting their lineups, who are not as active, that if they continue in that way, they're going to get replaced. That's essential. And in every league that I've been in where there's a good commissioner, that person is an excellent communicator. They have to be detail oriented. So they have to understand the nuances of the league, and they have to make sure that the draft is set up. It's amazing. Twice this year, I had to help other commissioners with their draft on Yahoo. Now, granted, Yahoo can be difficult. It can be confusing. They had changed a setting, and so when they went into the draft order was not what they had set previously. That was one issue. We had to stop the draft, reschedule it, fix the rule, fix the draft order, and then get back on. But a good commissioner is going to be detail-oriented. They're going to plan ahead. They're going to let the league know things that are coming up, when the trade deadline is, when the draft is, how the playoffs are going to work, and if it's a dynasty league, what is needed to play for the number one overall pick for next year. Those are all things that are very important for the league members to know. They're also going to create a balanced format. This is really interesting because if the league format is not balanced, it's going to not be enjoyable to play in. Every league is an economy, and with every economy, the basic tenet of an economy is supply and demand. So if you have too few teams and too many players available, the rosters are too small, or you have too many teams and the rosters are too big. So a good commissioner is going to tweak the format before the league ever starts to make sure that there's going to be a balance of supply and demand. You don't want too many players in free agency, because then people can just cherry pick out of free agency, and it discourages trading amongst teams. If the teams have most of the good talent on their rosters, that is going to encourage trading. You'd rather have less people in free agency than too many. So that's a red flag. If you see that the rosters are too small, it's going to make the league not that fun. And I'm in a couple of those types of leagues. Your starting lineup to bench ratio should be about 2-1. So if you've got 10 in your starting lineup, you should have a bench of at least 5. 6 or 7 is probably better. I'm in a league of 40-man roster in one of my dynasty leagues. And so it's a 20-man roster with IDP and then 20-man bench with 2 injured reserves. It's a pretty good balance, 12 teams. So you've got to know the sleepers. You have to be knowledgeable about that. You have to be knowledgeable about rookies coming up. But that's a good thing to look at. What is the lineup to bench ratio? It should be around 2-1. If it's not, it's going to be like laying in bed with a sheet that's too small. You just either your feet are going to be uncovered or your top half's going to be uncovered. It's going to be uncomfortable for you, and not in a good way. He or she is also going to update the rules, create polls, etc., to continue to tweak the league to keep up with what's happening in real life. The NFL of today is very different than it was like in 2005. The way that the league plays, the rules on both the offensive and the defensive side of the ball. And if you're in a league that hasn't kept up with that, it's not going to be very enjoyable. And then finally, a good commissioner is going to keep an eye on owners. So if an owner's not setting his lineup, he's not responding to trade offers, he's hard to access, the commissioner is going to weed these people out and replace them as needed to keep the league alive and fresh. Number 2, why you hate your league: format imbalance. So we talked about this. Small rosters, poor lineup to bench ratio, too many teams, too few teams, and inactive owners. All of these things contribute to a league that's not that fun. So you really want to investigate the size of the rosters, the activity of the owners. It seems like there's a lot of banter going on. That's a good thing. That means that people are engaged. Number 3, boring owners. What defines a boring owner? They don't trade. There's lack of engagement. They don't set their lineups. Your trade offers sit for days. They only add or subtract from their team from waivers, and there's no real talk. You know, what's the point in having a league of people when nobody's interacting with each other? I call it the bonsai tree syndrome, where we're all just in our little cubicles pruning our bonsai trees in silence, like it's some sort of like monastery or like a monk retreat. Like, let's get some talking going on here, guys. This is why it's the social aspect is a big reason why we play. And I just don't like the leagues that I'm in where there's like no talking, there's no interacting amongst the owners. It's like I might as well just play by myself, really. Number 4, standard scoring and standard rosters. So here's an example of a standard roster. You've got 10 teams, 1 QB, 2 RBs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 flex, 1 defense, 1 kicker. Boring. Super boring. There's no challenge here, and it doesn't even reflect the way that the league operates now. Back in 2003, 2004, you had guys like Priest Holmes. You had the 3-down back, Ricky Williams, LaDainian Tomlinson, guys that were the first and second down back, the third down back for passing plays, the goal line back. And so they did it all. Amon Green was another one. And so if you had these guys, I mean, you just dominate. The average lifespan, career span of these running backs was like 2.5 years. So these guys were not lasting. So what teams started to do was diffuse the workload amongst 2 or 3 different backs. So now you had a third down back. Now you had a goal line back. So you might have 3 different backs, and slowly all the teams basically adopted that to where we are today, where you've got Derrick Henry, you've got Eckler, I guess, you've got Barkley, Jonathan Taylor. I mean, technically Najee Harris, but he's a whole different story because of his quarterback play and his offensive line. The teams are set up to have the load distributed amongst many. So McCaffrey, but then you've got to look at those 3-down backs and say how many of them are injury risks. Is McCaffrey an injury risk? Is Barkley, has he shown that he can endure? I mean, Derrick Henry is pretty durable, but even last year he got injured. And so if you were counting on him to finish out your year, you were disappointed. He wasn't there for your playoff run. So you've got to look at these guys. Eckler is a kind of a mutant because he's not used in the traditional sense. He's used in a lot of passing plays. So he's not taking that beating between the tackles that a lot of these other guys are. But even he has had his injuries in the past. So when you're in a league that has only 2 running backs and a flex, it doesn't reflect the state of the current NFL. If you draft Ezekiel Elliott, you've got to draft Pollard. If you draft Aaron Jones, you've got to draft A.J. Dillon. If you draft even Dalvin Cook, you've got to draft Madison. And on and on and on it goes. Are you going to start in your second RB spot? If you've got Ezekiel Elliott, are you going to put Pollard in there? So instead of one guy getting you 25 points, one guy's getting you 15 and one's getting you 10. Or one's getting you 12, one's getting you 13. You need more running back spots to reflect the state of the NFL. That is just a basic. And a lot of leagues are not keeping up. And then 2 wide receivers, that's all? 2 wide receivers? With all of the wide receiving talent out there, the depth, and then also the way that the league plays with quarterback play, you're only going to start 2 wide receivers? So if you don't score a top wide receiver, you don't have that chance to make it up on the back end if there was 3 or 4 wide receivers. Because that 3rd or 4th wide receiver that you have could be a boom or bust guy, but the day that they have a boom day gets you the win. But they're not even allowed in your lineup. There's no room for them. So you've got to start a Curtis Samuel or you've got to keep starting a McLaurin. And it's like they've got the name value, or a DJ Moore, like a Robert Woods, or even a Juju Smith-Schuster. Like if he's your second wide receiver, you kind of like already done for the week. Tight ends also have played a much larger role in the last decade. So having just one tight end is not very challenging. And then if your defense and your kicker, like if the scoring, there's some leagues where you can count the actual field goal. So if they kick a 50-yarder, it's worth 6 points. But then you can also count the points for the yardage. So if it's 10 yards per point, then that's like an 11-point play right there. So it makes your kickers much more interesting. And then if you start two of them in a 10-team league, there's plenty of opportunity to start two kickers. You start two defenses, and instead of getting a point for a sack, you get 4 points for a sack or 6 points for a sack. You get a point for a tackle for loss. You get a point for a tackle. You get 6 points for an interception. You get 10 points for a safety. You get 4 points for a fumble instead of 2, or you get 5 points for a fumble recovery. That boosts the value of your defenses, and now those become much more relevant, pertinent, and interesting. It makes the league more challenging. So if you're just in a standard scoring league with standard rosters, it's boring. No way around it. And finally, if it's a redraft league, it's just not as challenging as a dynasty league. Even a keeper league isn't. Once you've played dynasty, keeper leagues are still kind of boring. They're not really that challenging. So in a redraft, if you're in a redraft league and you had a poor draft and your team just stinks, and maybe it's a 12-team league, there's not a lot out in free agency, there's no opportunity to improve your team. Nobody's trading, and they're just rejecting all the trades. There's no counter offers. It's like this is dumb. Like, I'm not even enjoying this. All my guys are injured. I have no opportunity to replace them. This isn't even the team I drafted. It's like I don't even know these guys. My starting running backs are Eno Benjamin and Deontay Foreman, because of injury and trades or whatever. And you're just like, I don't even know who these guys are. Like, okay, they put up 20 points. I guess that's great. But I have no knowledge about them. I don't know if this is going to last or if it was just a one-game fluke. I have no idea. It really can cause you to just tank your interest in that league. Take a look at your leagues. If you're thinking of joining leagues, take a look at all of these things. It starts with the commissioner. Look at the balance of the format, the rosters, the owners, and whether it's redraft or dynasty. This video, using this, will help you choose leagues that are going to be engaging year in and year out. I'm Jordy. This is Dynasty Road. I'll see you in the next video.